The helicopter blades cut through the thick Afghan air as Team Bravo descended toward the remote village of Karabad. Lieutenant Commander Jake Morrison adjusted his night vision goggles and checked his weapon one final time. Intelligence had reported Taliban movement in the area, and their mission was clear: eliminate the threat and secure the village. What they found instead would haunt Morrison for the rest of his career. The village was eerily quiet when the 8-man SEAL team touched down. Houses stood empty, doors swinging open in the desert wind. Chief Petty Officer Marcus Chen signaled to his men, and they moved in formation through the narrow streets. Something was wrong. The silence felt heavy, unnatural. "Where is everyone?" whispered Petty Officer Rodriguez through the comm. Morrison held up his fist, stopping the team. In the distance, they could hear faint sounds, not gunfire, but something else: crying, moaning, the unmistakable sounds of pain. They found the source behind a collapsed mud brick wall. Bodies lay scattered across a small courtyard. Men, women, children, the aftermath of what appeared to be a massacre. But as they approached, Chen noticed movement among the carnage. "We got survivors," he called out softly. "Hospital corpsman second class." David Park, the team's medic, immediately moved forward with his medical kit. In the military, Navy corpsmen are assigned to Marine and SEAL units as combat medics. Park had seen his share of battlefield trauma, but this was different. These weren't soldiers. They were civilians caught in the crossfire of someone else's war. An elderly man reached toward them with a trembling hand. A young boy, maybe 8 years old, sat motionless against a wall, his eyes wide with shock. But it was the woman in the corner that caught Park's attention. She sat perfectly still, her back against a crumbling wall. Her dark hair was matted with blood, and her traditional Afghan clothing was torn and stained. What struck Park immediately was her posture. Despite obvious injuries, she sat upright, alert, watching their every movement with calculating eyes. Most trauma victims in shock either cried out in pain or went completely silent from psychological trauma. This woman was silent, but there was something different about her stillness. It wasn't the silence of shock or fear. It was controlled, purposeful. Park approached slowly, holding his hands visible. "Ma'am, I'm a medic. I'm here to help." She looked at him but said nothing. Her eyes were intelligent, aware. Park could see blood seeping through her clothing near her left shoulder and what appeared to be a leg injury, yet she showed no signs of distress. "I need to check your injuries," Park said, setting down his medical kit. He had learned basic Pashto phrases during deployment, and he tried them now. Still no response. As Park began his examination, he noticed something odd. The woman's breathing was controlled, measured. When he touched near her shoulder wound, which should have been extremely painful, she didn't flinch. Her muscle tone suggested someone in excellent physical condition, unusual for a village woman in this remote area. Morrison and Chen secured the perimeter while Park worked. The elderly man they had found died within minutes, his injuries too severe. The boy appeared physically unharmed, but was in severe psychological shock. "How's the woman?" Morrison asked, approaching Park. "Stable, but something's off," Park replied quietly. "Gunshot wound to the shoulder, looks clean, through and through. Shrapnel in her left leg. But her vitals are too stable for someone who should be in tremendous pain." Park continued his assessment. When he checked her pulse, her heart rate was elevated but steady, not the racing pulse of someone in trauma. Her skin temperature was normal. Most telling was her breathing pattern, slow, controlled, like someone managing pain through training rather than medication. "Sir," Rodriguez called from across the courtyard, "you need to see this." Morrison jogged over to where Rodriguez stood near what appeared to be a weapons cache hidden beneath a fallen beam. AK-47s, ammunition, and something else. Sophisticated communication equipment far more advanced than what local Taliban typically possessed. Meanwhile, Park was making his own discoveries. As he cleaned the woman's shoulder wound, he noticed something that made him pause. The gunshot wound was indeed clean, but the scarring around it suggested this wasn't her first bullet wound. He could see faint marks that indicated previous trauma. Healed knife cuts on her forearms, old burn scars on her hands. These weren't the scars of an unlucky civilian. These were the scars of someone who had seen combat. Park looked at the woman's hands more closely as he bandaged her wounds. Her fingernails were short and practical. Her hands, though covered in dust and blood, showed calluses in specific patterns consistent with weapons training. The callus on her trigger finger was particularly pronounced. When Park lifted her arm to wrap the bandage, he felt the muscle definition beneath her traditional clothing. This woman was in fighting condition. "Ma'am," Park said softly in English, "I know you can understand me." For the first time, her eyes focused directly on his. Just for a moment, but it was enough. Park had seen that look before. In the eyes of fellow operators, soldiers who had seen action and learned to mask pain, fear, and tactical awareness behind a carefully constructed facade. Morrison's voice crackled through the comm. "Park, how long until she's stable for transport?" "She's stable now, sir, but I recommend we keep her sedated during transport." "Why?" Park glanced at the woman who was still watching him with those calculating eyes. "Just a precaution." "Sir." As the extraction helicopter approached, Park finished treating the woman's injuries. The shrapnel had been easy to remove, and both wounds would heal cleanly with proper care. What worried him wasn't her physical condition. It was the growing certainty that this woman was not who she appeared to be. When they loaded her onto the helicopter, she remained silent but aware. Park noticed that despite her injuries, she instinctively positioned herself to observe the aircraft's layout, the crew positions, and the other passengers. Her eyes tracked the movements of each SEAL team member. During the flight to the forward operating base, Park monitored her vital signs: heart rate steady, blood pressure normal, breathing controlled. For someone who had just survived a massacre and sustained significant injuries, her physiological responses were remarkably stable. As they flew through the night sky, Park found himself studying the woman's face. Beneath the blood and dust, her features were sharp, intelligent. Her bone structure suggested she might not even be Afghan, perhaps Pakistani or Iranian. Her skin tone could have indicated any number of Middle Eastern or Central Asian origins. But it was her eyes that bothered him most. Even sedated, there was an alertness there that didn't fit. Village women in remote Afghanistan lived hard lives, but this was something else entirely. This was the alertness of someone trained to observe, to assess, to survive. When they touched down at the base, Park helped transfer the woman to the medical facility. As they moved her from the helicopter to the gurney, she briefly regained full consciousness. For just a moment, their eyes met. In that moment, Park saw something that sent a chill down his spine. Recognition. Not the confused recognition of someone emerging from trauma, but the sharp tactical recognition of someone identifying a potential threat or ally. She knew exactly where she was, what was happening, and who they were. As the medical team took over her care, Park pulled Morrison aside. "Sir, I need to speak with you privately." Morrison looked back at the woman being wheeled into the medical tent. "What is it, Park?" "Sir, I don't think she's a civilian." The words hung in the air between them as the sounds of the base continued around them. Helicopters, vehicles, the distant chatter of radio communications. Morrison studied Park's face, noting the concern in his medic's expression. "What makes you say that?" Park glanced back toward the medical facility. "Everything, sir. her physical condition, her response to pain, her awareness level, and something else. I think she's been monitoring our movement since we found her." Morrison's expression hardened. In the world of special operations, assumptions could get people killed. If Park's instincts were correct, they had just brought a potential enemy operative onto their base. "Keep this between us for now," Morrison said, "but document everything you observed. We'll need to report this up the chain." As they watched the medical tent, neither man noticed the woman inside turning her head slightly toward the tent wall, listening to the sounds of the base around her, filing away information that might prove useful later. The wounded woman who had said nothing was indeed silent, but she was far from helpless, and she was definitely not an ordinary civilian. The base medical facility hummed with activity as dawn broke over the forward operating base. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, the chief medical officer, had taken over the woman's care from Park, but she was equally puzzled by her patient's condition. "Her wounds are healing remarkably well," Dr. Mitchell reported to Morrison during the morning briefing. "Almost too well. Her pain tolerance is extraordinary, and her recovery rate suggests someone in peak physical condition." Morrison exchanged a glance with Park, who stood nearby reviewing medical charts. "Has she said anything yet?" "Not a word, but she's been awake for hours, and I can tell she's listening to everything we say. When I speak to other patients in English, she doesn't react. But when the interpreters speak in Pashto, Dari, or Arabic, I notice subtle changes in her breathing pattern." Captain Hayes, the base intelligence officer, entered the medical tent carrying a folder. "Morrison, we need to talk about your Jane Doe." They moved to a secure briefing room where Hayes spread photographs across a table. Satellite images of the village where they had found her, before and after the attack. "We've been analyzing the scene," Hayes began. "The weapons cache your team found wasn't random. The communication equipment was high-end, military-grade. Someone was coordinating with outside forces." Morrison studied the images. "Taliban? That's what we thought initially. But the attack pattern doesn't fit Taliban methodology. This was precise, targeted. And look at this." Hayes pointed to a thermal image taken hours before their arrival. "These heat signatures show at least 12 people in that compound. Your team found 7 bodies. So 5 people escaped," Park said, "or were never there to begin with." Hayes pulled out another photograph, this one a close-up of the courtyard where they had found the woman. "Notice anything about where you found her?" Park leaned forward. "She was positioned with a clear view of all entrances to the courtyard and she was the only survivor in a defensive position," Morrison finished. "Everyone else was caught in the open." Hayes nodded grimly. "Gets better. We ran her fingerprints through the system while she was unconscious." He pulled out a classified document with several red stamps across the top. "Meet Zara Khan, Pakistani ISI, trained at their Special Services Group Academy. Age 28, specializes in deep cover operations and weapons trafficking in the Afghanistan-Pakistan border region." The room fell silent. The Pakistani Inter-Services Intelligence Agency was nominally an ally in the war on terror, but everyone in the room knew the reality was more complicated. ISI had been playing multiple sides throughout the conflict. "She's a spy," Morrison said. "More than that. She's been tracking weapons shipments between Taliban and ISI for the past 18 months. According to our intelligence, she's gone dark 3 times in the past year, each time emerging with critical intelligence about weapons trafficking networks." Dr. Mitchell's voice came through the intercom. "Captain Hayes, you need to get down here. Now!" They rushed back to the medical facility to find Dr. Mitchell standing beside an empty hospital bed. The restraints that had secured the woman's injured leg lay cut cleanly through. The IV had been professionally removed. Most telling of all, the morphine drip had been carefully adjusted to maintain the appearance of sedation while actually delivering saline solution. "How long has she been gone?" Morrison demanded. I checked on her 20 minutes ago. She was apparently sedated. The monitors still show normal vitals because she rigged them to replay the last recorded readings. Park examined the cut restraints. These were sliced with something extremely sharp. A medical scalpel could do it, but it would take time and skill. Hayes was already on his radio, calling for base-wide security alert. All teams, we have a potential hostile loose on base. Pakistani female, 5'6", dark hair, injured left shoulder and leg. Consider armed and extremely dangerous. But Morrison was studying the scene more carefully. Wait! Look at this. He pointed to the woman's medical chart, which had been left on the bedside table. Written in neat English script across the bottom of the chart was a message. Thank you for the medical care. I mean no harm to your people. ZK. She left a note? Dr. Mitchell stared at the chart. In perfect English? Park shook his head. She understood every word we said. She's been gathering intelligence on us since the moment we found her. For the next 6 hours, the base was locked down as security teams searched every building, vehicle, and possible hiding place. They found nothing. It was as if Zara Khan had simply vanished. Then, as suddenly as she had disappeared, she returned. Morrison was in the communications center reviewing tactical reports when Sergeant Williams burst through the door. Sir, you need to see this. On the main security monitor, they could see a figure approaching the main gate. Even in the grainy black and white feed, Morrison recognized her immediately. Zara Khan walked steadily toward the checkpoint, both hands visible, moving slowly and deliberately. She's coming back, Morrison said in disbelief. Hayes joined them in the communications center as they watched the security feed. Why would she come back? She could be miles away by now. The gate guards were in position, weapons drawn but not aimed directly at her. Through the radio, they could hear the lead guard's voice. Stop right there. Identify yourself. For the first time since they had found her, Zara Khan spoke. Her English was accented but clear, her voice steady despite her injuries. My name is Zara Khan. I am an officer with Pakistani Inter-Services Intelligence. I am requesting a meeting with your commanding officer. Morrison grabbed a radio and headed for the gate, Hayes and Park following close behind. When they reached the checkpoint, they found Zara standing calmly with her hands clasped behind her back, her posture military straight despite her obvious pain. Up close, Morrison could see that she had somehow acquired clean clothing, standard civilian dress that wouldn't have been available in the medical facility. Her shoulder wound was rebandaged with professional skill, and she showed no signs of the leg injury that should have made walking difficult. Agent Khan, Morrison said formally, you left our medical facility without authorization. I needed to verify something, she replied simply, and to prove that I could leave and return without harming anyone on your base. Hayes stepped forward. We know who you are. The question is why you were in that village and what happened there. Zara's expression didn't change, but Morrison caught a flicker of something in her eyes. Pain, but not physical pain. The people in that village were my responsibility. I was gathering intelligence on a weapons trafficking network that has been supplying both Taliban and other groups with advanced weaponry. Someone learned of my identity. Taliban? Morrison asked. No, someone much more dangerous. She paused, clearly weighing her words carefully. The weapons cache your team discovered belong to a network that includes corrupt elements within multiple intelligence agencies, Pakistani, Afghan, and others. When they discovered my investigation, they decided to eliminate all potential witnesses. Park stepped forward. The other survivors from the village, where are they? There are no other survivors, Zara said quietly. The attack was designed to look like Taliban violence, but it was actually a cleanup operation. Everyone in that compound knew about the weapons trafficking. Everyone except the family that lived there. They were simply in the wrong place. The implications of her words settled over the group. They had stumbled into something far more complex than a simple Taliban operation. Morrison made a decision. Agent Khan. Would you be willing to debrief with our intelligence team? That depends, she replied. Are you willing to share intelligence about the weapons cache with Pakistani authorities? Hayes shook his head immediately. We can't commit to that without authorization from higher command. Zara nodded as if she had expected this answer. Then I propose an alternative. Give me access to the communication equipment you found. Let me trace the network connections. In exchange, I will provide you with intelligence about planned attacks on coalition forces in this region. Morrison looked at Hayes, who was already calculating the potential value of the intelligence versus the risk of trusting a foreign agent. After a long moment, Hayes nodded slightly. We'll need to verify your identity through official channels first, Morrison said. Of course. Zara reached slowly into her clothing and pulled out a waterproof packet. Inside were Pakistani military identification, ISI credentials, and contact information for her handlers. You may contact Colonel Ahmad Malik at ISI headquarters in Rawalpindi. He will confirm my identity and mission status. As Hayes examined the documents, Park noticed something else. Agent Khan, how did you acquire clean clothing and medical supplies while off base? For the first time, Zara almost smiled. Your base security is very good, Corpsman Park, but it's designed to keep people from getting in, not necessarily to keep someone from moving freely within the base once they're already inside. Morrison felt a chill. You never left the base. I needed to observe your security procedures, communication protocols, and response capabilities. Standard intelligence gathering. But I also needed to prove to you that despite having the opportunity, I chose not to compromise your operational security. The audacity of her actions was staggering, but Morrison had to admire the tactical thinking behind it. By demonstrating her capabilities while simultaneously proving her restraint, she had established a foundation for trust. Hayes finished his radio conversation with higher command and rejoined the group. Your identity is confirmed, Agent Khan. Colonel Malik speaks very highly of your capabilities. However, he also mentioned that you have a reputation for independent operations. In my line of work, independence is often the difference between success and death, Zara replied. But I understand your concerns. I propose a supervised cooperation. Your team maintains oversight, but I get access to the intelligence I need to complete my mission. Morrison considered the proposal. Working with foreign intelligence was always risky, but the potential intelligence value was enormous. And something about Zara Khan, her professionalism, her restraint, her willingness to return voluntarily, suggested she might be trustworthy. We'll arrange a secure workspace, he decided. But Agent Khan, understand that trust must be earned on both sides. I would expect nothing less, she replied. And please call me Zara. We're going to be working together. As they walked back toward the base, Park noticed that despite her professional demeanor, Zara favored her left leg slightly, and her face showed signs of carefully controlled pain. She was injured, exhausted, and operating far from any support network. Yet she continued to function at a high level. Whatever else she might be, Zara Khan was undeniably a professional. What none of them realized was that the real test of their cooperation was about to begin. The communication equipment they had found contained information that would put all of their lives in danger. And Zara's true mission was far more complex than she had revealed. The secure intelligence facility buzzed with activity as Zara worked alongside the SEAL team and base intelligence analysts. 3 days had passed since she had voluntarily returned to the base, and the scope of what they had discovered was staggering. Morrison watched through the observation window as Zara expertly navigated the captured communication equipment. Her fingers moved across the complex interfaces with the skill of someone who had used similar systems many times before. Hayes stood beside her, taking notes as she explained the network connections she was uncovering. "This isn't just weapons trafficking," Zara said, pointing to data streams on multiple monitors. "This network has been coordinating attacks specifically designed to prolong the conflict. Every time coalition forces make progress, they provide intelligence or weapons to ensure continued resistance." Park, who had been monitoring Zara's medical condition, noticed that despite working 16-hour days, her injuries were healing at a remarkable rate. More concerning was her obvious exhaustion. She was pushing herself far beyond what someone in her condition should attempt. "Agent Khan," Park interrupted, "you need rest. Your body is still recovering from significant trauma." Zara looked up from the monitors, and for a moment her professional mask slipped. Morrison caught a glimpse of the exhaustion she was hiding, but also something else. Urgency bordering on desperation. "There's something I haven't told you," she said quietly. "Something that changes everything." Hayes leaned forward. "What kind of something?" Zara hesitated, clearly weighing the consequences of what she was about to reveal. "The attack on the village wasn't just to eliminate witnesses. It was to kill me specifically. The weapons trafficking network, I've been tracking it for 2 years, not 18 months. Morrison felt the pieces clicking into place. "You've been deep undercover. Deeper than anyone knows. Even my own handlers at ISI believe I've gone rogue." Zara pulled up a new set of files on the computer, data that had been hidden in encrypted sections of the communication equipment. "6 months ago, I discovered that the trafficking network includes senior officials within ISI itself. I couldn't report it through normal channels because I didn't know who could be trusted." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Zara hadn't just been gathering intelligence, she had been operating as a lone agent against her own agency. Hayes spoke first. "That's why you've been silent about your mission parameters. You're not here with official support." "I'm here because this is the only safe place left," Zara admitted. "The network knows I'm alive, and they know I have evidence of their operations. They'll keep coming until they eliminate me or I expose them." Morrison studied the data on the screens. Financial transactions, communication logs, shipping manifests. It was a comprehensive record of a conspiracy that reached into multiple governments and military organizations. "What do you need from us?" Morrison asked. "Help me get this information to people who can act on it, but not through normal intelligence channels. Too many of those channels are compromised." Before anyone could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the base. Emergency lights flashed red, and Morrison's radio crackled to life with urgent reports. "All teams to defensive positions. We have incoming artillery fire from multiple positions. This is not a drill." Morrison grabbed his gear and turned to Hayes. "Get Agent Khan to the secure bunker." "No," Zara said firmly, already moving toward her own equipment bag, which, Morrison realized, she must have retrieved during her unauthorized departure from the medical facility. "This attack is because of me. They've found me." The first explosions rocked the base as mortars began landing inside the perimeter. Through the facility windows, they could see muzzle flashes from multiple positions in the hills surrounding the base. "This is too coordinated for Taliban," Hayes said, studying the tactical display. "Someone's been feeding them intelligence about our defensive positions." Zara was checking her weapons with the efficiency of someone who had done this many times before. Morrison noticed she carried a modified Pakistani-made assault rifle and a sidearm that looked like it had seen considerable use. "They'll target the communication equipment first," Zara said. "If they destroy the evidence, my mission fails and more people die." Morrison made a split-second decision. "Hayes, coordinate base defense. Park, you're with Agent Khan and me. We secure the intelligence and find a way to transmit it off base." Another explosion, closer this time. Through the radio, they could hear reports of infiltrators attempting to breach the perimeter in multiple locations. As they moved through the base toward the secure communications center, Morrison noticed something remarkable about Zara's movement. Despite her injuries, she moved with the fluid precision of an elite soldier. Her tactical awareness was extraordinary. She anticipated threats, covered angles, and coordinated with his team as if she had trained with them for years. "How long have you been in the field?" Morrison asked, as they took cover from incoming fire. "Continuously? 3 years," Zara replied while scanning for targets. "I was inserted deep cover to track this network. My official mission was supposed to last 6 months. They reached the communications center as enemy forces broke through the eastern perimeter. Through the windows, Morrison could see uniformed fighters moving with military precision, not the typical Taliban force structure. "Pakistani military uniforms," Zara observed grimly. "They're not even trying to hide their involvement anymore." Park was setting up a defensive position when he noticed something that made his blood run cold. "Those aren't Pakistani regulars. Look at their movement patterns." Morrison followed Park's gaze and realized he was right. These fighters moved like special operations forces. Coordinated, professional, deadly. "ISI Special Services Group," Zara confirmed. "My former colleagues. They've been ordered to clean up the security breach. Permanently." The irony wasn't lost on any of them. Zara was being hunted by the very organization she had served loyally for years. Morrison activated the secure communication system while Zara began uploading the intelligence files. "How long do you need?" 10 minutes for a complete data transfer," she replied, her fingers flying over the keyboard. "But I can get the critical intelligence out in 3 minutes." Through the radio, they could hear Hayes coordinating the base defense. Enemy forces were approaching from multiple directions, but the main thrust seemed focused on their building. "They know exactly where we are," Morrison realized. Zara paused in her work. "Of course they do. They've been tracking the communication equipment's unique signatures since your team captured it." The building shuddered under direct mortar fire. Emergency lighting flickered, and dust rained from the ceiling. 2 minutes, Zara announced. Park had positioned himself at the window, providing covering fire as enemy forces attempted to approach the building. Morrison was coordinating with Hayes when he noticed something on Zara's computer screen that made him freeze. Among the files being transmitted was a document labeled Operation Silent Thunder, Coalition Force Targeting Data. "Agent Khan," Morrison said carefully, "what exactly are you transmitting?" Without looking away from her screen, Zara replied, "Everything. The complete network files, including planned attacks on coalition forces throughout the region." "Including our base?" "Including your base." She turned to face him, and Morrison saw something in her eyes he hadn't expected. Regret. "I'm sorry you're caught up in this. But if I don't get this intelligence out, hundreds of coalition soldiers will die in coordinated attacks over the next month." Morrison understood. Zara had led the attack to this base not just to save herself, but to ensure the intelligence reached people who could act on it. She had used their rescue of her as a way to complete her mission. "Transmission complete," she announced. The enemy assault intensified immediately, as if they had detected the data transmission. Automatic weapons fire shattered the windows, and Morrison could hear enemy forces entering the building. "Time to go," Morrison said, but Zara was already packing additional equipment. "Not yet. I need to destroy the original communication equipment to ensure they can't trace the intelligence sources." "The building's about to be overrun," Park warned from his position. "Then we make our stand here," Zara said simply. She attached explosives to the communication equipment with practiced efficiency. "The intelligence is away, but if they capture this equipment, they can identify other deep cover agents throughout the region." Morrison realized that Zara had known from the beginning this might be a one-way mission. She had volunteered to return to the base not just for her own safety, but because it was the only way to ensure the mission succeeded. The first enemy soldiers reached their floor. Morrison and Park engaged them while Zara finished setting the charges. Her movements remained precise and professional, even under fire. "Charges set," she announced. 30-second delay. They fought their way to the building's rear exit as the explosion destroyed the intelligence equipment behind them. Hayes's voice crackled through the radio. Base defense forces were pushing back the enemy assault, but it would be close. As they reached the extraction point, Morrison turned to Zara. "What happens now?" "You can't go back to ISI." "No," she agreed. "But the intelligence I transmitted will reach the right people. The network will be exposed and the attacks will be prevented." "And you?" For the first time since he had met her, Zara smiled genuinely. "I'll find a new mission. There's always another network to investigate, another threat to counter." Hayes appeared with a security team to escort them to safety. As they moved toward the secure area, Morrison couldn't help but admire the woman who had turned what appeared to be a rescue mission into a complex intelligence operation that had potentially saved hundreds of lives. Later, after the attack had been repelled and the base secured, Morrison found Zara in the medical facility where Park was treating her reopened shoulder wound. "The intelligence you transmitted," Morrison said. "Command confirms it's already being acted upon. 3 major weapon shipments have been intercepted, and several planned attacks have been prevented." Zara nodded but said nothing. "There's something else," Morrison continued. "Command has offered you asylum and a position with coalition intelligence forces. And if I refuse, then we'll help you reach whatever destination you choose. You've earned that much." Zara was quiet for a long moment, clearly weighing her options. Finally, she looked up at Morrison with those same calculating eyes that had first caught Park's attention. "I accept, but I have one condition. The next time you encounter someone who appears to be an ordinary civilian in an extraordinary situation, remember that appearances can be deceiving. Sometimes the people who need help the most are the ones who appear to need it the least." Morrison nodded, understanding. In a world of complex alliances and hidden enemies, Zara Khan had proven that courage and dedication could exist in the most unexpected places. 6 months later, intelligence reports would credit the network exposure with preventing a coordinated series of attacks that could have killed over 300 coalition soldiers and Afghan civilians. The operation would be classified for years. But Morrison and his team would never forget the wounded woman who had remained silent not because she couldn't speak, but because she was protecting secrets that could save lives. Zara Khan had indeed been far from an ordinary civilian. She had been something much more valuable, a true professional who understood that sometimes the greatest courage lies in silence, and sometimes the most important battles are fought by those the world never recognizes. The SEALs had thought they were rescuing a victim. Instead, they had partnered with one of the most effective intelligence operatives in the region, a woman who had sacrificed her career, her safety, and nearly her life to protect people she would never meet. In the dangerous world of military intelligence, there was no higher compliment than that.